we want to make this video because we enjoy this format so
Absolutely.
much. It's so much fun to play Canadian Highlander, and I feel like a car salesman just like running around being like, this format, like if you're looking for something, this is the format to do it. Like
Yeah.
this is so much fun.
Hello, and welcome into the Cryptic Keep. I'm Siobhan.
My name's Austin.
And Austin, I wanted to talk with you, to everyone watching, about getting into Canadian Highlander.
Yeah.
Canadian Highlander is a player-controlled, player-grown format that you and I hold very near and dear to our hearts. It's what all of the videos we make are about. And I wanted to make a resource for you watching this, or maybe to give to a friend, about how to get into Canadian Highlander and some of the initial hurdles that a lot of people fall into, trying to bypass those or maybe make it easier for you.
Canadian Highlander format can be daunting. Like,
can be very
it's a huge
daunting.
card list. There's 100 cards, a lot of decisions to make. The resources are all over the place because we're kind of a new format or a young format in terms of like maturity. So yeah, I'm excited to see
And it's
what this is.
very high power, very wide card pool. So it can really feel like you're staring into the abyss a lot. So
little do you know, both of us were new players at some point in our lives. So we come with some experience of being a new player.
Yeah. So I want to just give a little brief explanation as to what Canadian Highlander is. It's a format that has basically two rules, and they are, it's 100 cards at 20 life, and each card must be unique. So if you've played EDH before, Commander, this isn't super strange to you. However, there's no ban list, but that of course excludes silver border cards, acorn cards, dexterity cards like Chaos Orb and stuff. Those were kind of we're shooing off to the side. But no ban list, 100 card singleton. But there is one more restriction to this, which is the points list.
Yeah.
So nothing's banned. So you get to play with some of the most powerful cards that you've ever seen, like Black Lotus, like Soul Ring, like Demonic Tutor, and maybe some ones that you haven't seen before, like Psychic Frog, or Balance, or True Name Nemesis. But they all have been given a points list, or points total, and your deck sum can't exceed 10.
Yeah, and this prevents people running, like, basically seeing a Black Lotus every game or a Mox in every game. Like, it allows like a little bit more diversity.
Yeah, instead of a third of your deck just being one of every good card, you have to limit yourself. You're not capable of playing all of them. So as a brief example, Black Lotus currently has 7 points. Demonic Tutor is 3. So a very common point spread, as it's called, would be these 10 points. 7, 3, just like that. However, an example of something that wouldn't work is Black Lotus and Time Walk. Time Walk is currently 5, so 7 and 5 would be a total of 12, and you can't exceed it. You can be lower. You can just play 8. Yeah. That's what you're feeling.
You could play 10 one-pointed cards if you really wanted to.
Or you can just play one 7-pointed card if you feel like you only really need Black Lotus as an example. So let me talk a little bit to Commander players. If you're not a Commander player, you can skip ahead to one of the other sections that we have in the little progress bar below. But if you are a Commander player, I want to talk to you a little bit about mindset.
We get a lot of Commander players who want to have maybe a more one-on-one competitive format. Maybe they like to play a lot more aggro decks or something, and they just don't get that feeling in EDH, a lot of like casual pods. And so we get a lot of people who come from Commander. Commander's their only format they've ever played before, maybe a little bit of Arena, and they're coming in and they're like, I have this Commander deck, you know? Like, how do I play Canadian Highlander?
So I want to help get you in the mindset of getting into Canadian Highlander from Commander. So the first thing I want to talk about is these big, broad stroke changes that completely shift how we view deck construction. The first thing is you don't have a commander. That means you also don't get like paired commanders. You also don't get a sideboard. so you don't get companions like Luris. So there's also no color restriction. So you can be as many colors as you want, or you can play hybrid cards if you'd like.
You can splash colors,
Yeah.
which is kind of fun. Yeah.
But we're at 20 life, which means that games are a lot quicker, especially since it's 1v1. And because games are also quicker, the curve of your deck's going to be quite a bit lower. And I'm going to just give you a rough ballpark that you really don't want to be playing cards that are more than 5 mana. I mean, preferably you want all of your cards to be 4 or less for the most part. Of course, there are exceptions to that rule. But I think if you look at your commander deck, this will give you a pretty good rule of thumb about the cards in your deck, and where things are going.
There's also no social contract. Like, I'm trying to kill my opponent, and my opponent's trying to kill me. So, like, there's no, like, do I blow up their stuff? Do I try to make an agreement? You know, like, a lot of these cards that might be rude to play.
Or
like
feel dirty.
Yeah, like, counterspell them. Just get them.
Just counterspell them.
Yep.
You can blow up their land. You can do anything you want.
You'll probably not hurt their feelings.
Yeah. It's part of the fun, really. So, if you're looking at your commander deck, I've kind of got a yes or no maybe board here, which is that if you're looking at your Voltron deck to potentially bring and just like shuffle your commander in, probably not a great idea because it's pretty focused around your commander. Same with any commander-based combos, anything that's reliant on you having a card in your command zone, like Rograk is a pretty common combo piece card. Not something you want to be doing. Typal decks are kind of hit or miss depending on what typal synergy you're going for. In some cases, they can be pretty good. Like Goblins is a very serious deck. Elves is a very serious deck. But again, if it's getting a little bit wider, a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit more esoteric, like Dragons or Changelings or something like that.
Yeah, look at your mana curve again.
You might be a little cautious to go with that. It's still something worth giving a try, especially if you're just trying out for the first time. However, aggressive decks, maybe a mono red commander, or a highly synergistic combo deck in some cases, like Aristocrats, these are both super good options. Aristocrats is a very popular deck in Canadian Highlander, and so is just turning red creatures sideways. The big two things that we're focusing on here is fast and not commander reliant.
Yeah. A lot of commander decks also do like this like win more type of mindset where we have to deal 40 damage to 3 opponents, and you'll see like Canadian Highlanders, like they love like a 1 mana 2/1 all of a sudden, you know,
love a 1 mana 2/1.
Like we're like, oh, it hits them for 4, right? And that's like a feeling that you don't get in commander of being valuable. So like converting like a double damage quote unquote card to a +4 damage quote unquote card, like that's
quite a lot.
That's a hard.
Yeah, but if you have a commander deck already put together and you just want to shuffle your commander in, that's like a great way to start.
Yeah.
I just want to give you, if you have multiple commanders, this is a great way to look at it and maybe prioritize one that might better suit playing in Canadian Highlander. The other thing, if you are bringing your commander deck to a Canadian Highlander night, one, make sure all of your sleeves are the same because you are shuffling it into the deck, and then remove any commander reliant cards. Cards that say of your commander's color identity, like Arcane Signet or Commander Tower, they just don't work because you don't have a commander. And I have seen people come in with their commander deck, with their commander shuffled in, and then draw an Arcane Signet and wince a little bit because they didn't realize this. So I want to get you ahead of the curve here and say, check for things like Arcane Signet, Command Tower, also some of these other creatures like Bastion Protector or the enchantments that give your commander something on attack. Be careful of those. The last thing, which I haven't had many people have to deal with, especially for commander decks, but it's always good to just double check, is making sure that you aren't exceeding 10 points. Most of the time, people's only pointed card in their deck is Soul Ring.
Yeah.
But we'll show you where to go to look at the points list in its entirety and just make sure.
This is probably more for CDH people, but like you're going to see a lot of points on fast mana and on tutors, and just about every CEH deck is just filled with those sort of things. And part of it's going to be looking at your cards and being like, okay, I have way too many tutors or way too many fast mana.
Right. So just double check. Hello, general and franchise players.
Welcome.
If you are not a general enfranchised player, you're not a commander player, you might want to skip ahead.
What do you mean by an enfranchised player?
I would say an enfranchised player is anyone who probably plays a format other than Commander, or has exclusively played a format other than Commander. Might that be Standard, or Modern, or Legacy, or Vintage,
Right.
or they have consistently played Magic through a number of different means, like Draft or Limited.
Right.
You probably have a pretty good idea of cards and rate, but we're not focusing here specifically on Commander, and more about having a slightly higher knowledge pool.
And you've played a variety of like 1v1
Right.
formats.
Yeah. If you're not, you might want to skip ahead to the beginner section later in this video in the progress bar down below. But let's talk a little bit about format feel and speed. This is something that as an enfranchised player, you get a pretty good idea of how fast Modern is compared to Legacy, or how fast Standard is compared to Modern.
Yeah.
These sorts of things. Also, comparing different limited environments is a very common example of format speed or feel. And the very easy boilerplate way of describing this to someone who hasn't played Canadian Highlander is that Canadian Highlander is like 100 card Legacy or Vintage Cube Plus.
Yeah.
So despite playing with the Power 9, it feels a lot more like the speed of Legacy because you're not playing with all of the powerful cards. In Vintage decks tend to have one of every Power 9 card very, very consistently. In this case, you're probably only playing a couple of the Moxen, and it's more about synergizing that with powerful cards like Orcish Bowmaster. Cards that you probably already know, like Murktide Regent and Ragavan Nimble Pilferer. But because this is a 100 card singleton and not 60 card fora, you kind of have to stretch for some of the cards that are B tier and C tier. And that is more why we're closer to the speed of Legacy, or in some cases Modern, than Vintage. And it's something very important to recognize because you aren't as reliant on just one card like Orcish Bowmaster or Murktide Regent or Ragavan.
Yeah, and you less care about how this one card affects Orcish Bowmasters because it's a staple in the format, and more how does it affect this generic group of cards. Yeah.
And you also don't have to be as worried about these cards alone.
Yeah.
Like, yes, a lot of decks are going to be playing Orcish Bowmaster, but you're probably not going to see it every game.
We've talked about this. If you hate one of these cards, you're only going to see it, maybe once or twice out of the 3. Yeah, like the chances that they see it is very, very low.
For new players, hello, new player.
Welcome.
If you are a new player and you skipped here, this is a great place to start. I will say, for anyone who's fairly new to Magic, who hasn't really played any other format before, maybe only played a Commander game once or twice, looking at getting into Magic, and you've heard about Canadian Highlander, or a friend is telling you about Canadian Highlander, I'm not going to lie to you. You're on a bit of an uphill battle, but I do really think it's worth the reward.
There's only tens of thousands of unique cards to look through and pick your favorite 100.
But I'm going to try and steer you in the right direction here. And the first thing I want to do is talk about starting with a good foundation. If you're a new player and maybe you've played Jumpstart or you've just played 1 or 2 Commander games, the big things that I want you to make sure you're focusing on to prioritize in learning are understanding as many keywords as you can, because that can be a lot of rote memorization early on. The next thing is like understanding the value and the steps of combat, because combat in 20 life formats can be very important. And the last thing is, if you don't know much about combos in Magic in general, it might be a good idea to kind of peruse maybe the EDH combo guide or list of A+B combos to get a rough feel of the kinds of things that are possible with very powerful cards put together.
Also, just ask questions. Like, our format is full of like really incredible people who are very friendly and they love showing off their deck and how it works. Like, let's say you lose your match, you'd be like, oh, tell me about the deck. How do you win? How does this combo work? Like, just ask a bunch of questions and you'll learn pretty fast.
Be not afraid of the people playing with you. Even though it's a very high power format, our goal is to have a good time beating each other up with Magic cards, not with words. But if you feel okay with these, the next thing I would recommend that you learn is looking into Legacy and Vintage, and maybe Cube for that matter, to get a better idea of the kind of cards that people are prioritizing. Legacy and Vintage tend to be the hallmarks for Canadian Highlander in like learning what cards will be powerful. And so getting a beat on those formats will give you a lot of insight to this.
I think there's a lot of similarities between Vintage and Legacy drafting and Canadian Highlander deck building. Like they'll make these very intelligent decisions for good reasons, and then you can like copy those in building a deck or editing a deck that you find online.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about sources for learning. If you're new and you're looking to maybe learn about Legacy to potentially learn about Canadian Highlander, or at least get an idea, I recommend, of course, North 100 by Loading Ready Run. It's the podcast that is specifically about Canadian Highlander. It might be the place that you've heard about Canadian Highlander, but if you haven't, I highly recommend you give it a shot. And then I've got some YouTubers that also focus more on Legacy and Vintage and
Powerful Magic, yeah.
Bosch and Roll is a fantastic YouTuber. Same with Thraben Yu. And Luis Scott Vargas does a lot about Powered Cube. A lot of these cards all commingle together and are a great way to learn about higher powered Magic in general. Stuff that I just wouldn't be able to tell you here because it's much more in depth.
And just like hearing their thought processes of why they're playing a card, what they're playing around, that can help.
And there are a bunch more Legacy and Vintage and Cube-based players that talk a lot about Magic. I just wanted to give you a couple that I like and have watched before, but please don't be afraid to explore and learn via other means. Now, let's talk a little bit about good starter decks. If you aren't starting with a commander deck that you're tinkering with and you want to put something together with your collection, I want to point you towards some specific deck lists that we'll link down below that I think are a great way to both potentially win and get a really good idea of the movement and the pace of a Canadian Highlander game. Those are primarily aggressive decks. I talked a little bit in a prior video that's about making a format at your local play store. And this is basically one for one exactly what I said, which is cheap, aggressive decks tend to fare pretty well and are pretty easy to pilot, but have a lot of room for player skill and growth. Red deck wins, or mono red, is maybe the easiest example because it's very, very cheap to make, excluding maybe Black Lotus or the Moxen that you're playing. And you can always beef it up into more medium red, as it's colloquially called, which cares more about 3 drops and 4 drops than the 1 or 2 drops that they prioritize. Mono white Death and Taxes is a very common archetype like this. Boros Taxes includes another color. Goblins, again, I have seen quite a few players come with their Goblin Commander deck and then start to actually win weeks after they've changed just a couple of the more mana intensive cards. And then Gruul monsters, just powerful Gruul 3 drops. Merfolk or Blue Moon, kind of a tempo control deck, all fairly cheap options that increase in price depending on if you're playing blue or black or green, are all great ways to start.
Why we recommend these type of decks is because, you know, there's like a tug and pull of like who's the beatdown, which is a very complicated way of looking things. When you play like a very aggressive deck, your game plan is very simple. You have a lot of redundant pieces. At some point in the game, usually the first few turns, you are quote unquote winning, which is really cool. And you don't have to know how to like mulligan really well. Like you can usually pull 7 cards and play them no matter what and still have like an active game. So these type of games you're going to have fun with and you're going to win a lot of games. And they don't take like the hundreds of hours of research to get incremental value in your deck.
And we tend to play in tournaments that are best of 3s. And even if you're playing one of these aggressive decks and you're still learning, you're probably going to have some bad beats games, or you're learning, you lose to something you didn't know about. You're still probably going to win one of those matches in the best of 3, just because you're an aggressive deck, and a lot of decks can't deal with that.
And if you lose, a lot of times it's pretty obvious why you lost, which is like helpful for learning.
Too aggressive, not aggressive enough is a
Exactly.
pretty easy thing to learn about.
If you have like a convoluted combo or control deck, you have no idea why you lost, and you're kind of just like, oh, this format sucks, and you leave.
So this is all to say, I highly, highly recommend you look at any 1 mana 2/1 in either red or white, and you slam them onto the board and give them a try. Mono red loves to play Ragavan and Norn Swift Survivalist. Mono white loves to play Recruitment Officer and Soldier of the Pantheon. There's so many more of these, and they win so many games.
Feel free to play anything though, to be honest. Like if you're passionate about a certain combo or a certain control deck, like you know, I say throw it. Just go in.
Just go for it. Yeah. Absolutely. The next thing I want to talk about is what's worth buying. If you are intrigued by everything that we're saying, I think it's very common for people to feel like, well, I want to buy in. Where do I start? Because, you know, money is a very powerful resource, as is life, that I want to make sure you're not just spending money on things that you end up not playing or feeling like wasn't worth the dollar price tag when you could have spent it on something else.
We should say that our format is very proxy friendly. Some places you can proxy your entire deck. So if what's worth buying is maybe a printer or a John that has a printer, like especially if this is your first few times, like no one's going to turn you down. You're like, yeah, throw it, play it, like have fun.
That's my next point, which is please make sure that you're checking if things are proxy friendly. Proxying is so powerful. It's something that I do all the time. This art that you see on the screen is literally the Ocelot Ride that I use, which is just a Meowth Pokemon card that I have whited out and written Ocelot Ride's text onto. No one cares at our local play group because they already know what I'm doing. And at the price point that it currently is of $30 or $40, people understand.
A lot of dual lands are just sharpied, bad, tapped lands, you know, where they just erase the enters tapped part. And whatever you do, just make sure it's legible and obvious of what card it is.
And that you're being open and honest and talking with your other players about it. But if you are looking to spend money on things, or your local play group requires that you have most of your cards in print, I would say the first step for any format in general are your lands, primarily your fetch lands and your surveil lands, and tertiarily your shock lands. I'm not talking about dual lands here. Just some of the most basic lands like these will go miles.
Well, they go in every deck, right?
They really go in every deck.
Just about every deck is going to play these. So like if you buy it once, you'll never have to buy it again. Well, if you buy like a Ragavan, it might not go in your blue deck.
The sigh of relief that I felt when I finally completed my cycle of fetch lands was unbelievable, because I didn't have to keep like beating around the bush about whether or not I had it or how many of them I had. It can be super, super helpful. The next step, if you have all of those, is the non-reserve list points cards. Quite a few of the cards on the points list are reserve list things like the Power 9, but a lot of them are decently pricey, things like Demonic Tutor, that do tend to be in a lot of decks. And being capable of playing all of your pointed cards in paper can be very, very powerful, or at least proxy the reserve list cards. Because again, a lot of these do tend to be in a lot of decks, and they're pointed for a reason.
Yeah, we have a lot of powerful cards too that are just like not very expensive. Too. Like they're staples in our format, but no other format really uses them. Commander, they're not good enough for Commander, but like they're like the second to third best thing in Legacy. So like, who's playing this? Maybe Cubes, you know, and like that's not a big market. So
Dig Through Time is like pennies still, and it's a point.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, sick.
The next thing is some of those powerful spells, if you have a better idea about what deck you're going to play specifically. Things like Force of Will, or Minsk and Boo, or Ragavan, or Ocelot Pride. These things are very powerful, and they will be a cornerstone of a lot of decks. And if you're very committed to a specific deck, I think it's worth paying the money for, but only after the lands and maybe some of the pointed cards. After that, it's basically everything else. You can buy whatever you want. I'm not going to stop you from that. But, you know, at some point you will just want to finish out the deck that you're making or the rough collection that you're working on. And then after that, of course, you can buy the reserve list cards if you have the money for it.
Where would you put like Mystical Archive, alternate art, you know, collector packs? Where would you put that, you know?
I would say bling things out at your own discretion.
Okay.
I mean, I think one of the fun things about playing powerful formats is you get to bling out with very cool, powerful old cards.
Yeah.
And when you have a shiny version of a very powerful card, it's always a showstopper. It's always exciting when you see it in your hand because not only is it powerful, it's also shiny.
What's nice about this format too is you only need one. So like you don't have to pay 4 times as much for blinging out all your ponders or whatever.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about general resources. So if you are fairly interested, there are quite a few links and places that you can check. Those are mostly the Canadian Highlander website. This is the place that you can look at the points list. This is also linked via Moxfield or and also Scryfall.
Yeah.
Both of these locations, if you look up a pointed card, like Black Lotus, they will have a link that points you right here, but it's also on the screen for you. The next is the Canadian Highlander Discord, which is accessible from the Canadian Highlander website. A bunch of fantastic people that will absolutely talk with you about whatever you need. You can find it on their website in the top right. There should be a little Discord icon that will send you the link for it. The next, of course, something we've already talked about, which is North 100, the podcast dedicated specifically to Canadian Highlander from the folks in Victoria, British Columbia. They are at LRRMTG on YouTube. And then lastly, I would highly recommend looking on Moxfield at deck lists. That's a great way to kind of get an idea, including the ones that are attached down below.
There's also staple lists that people have posted, which are interesting to look at too, if you're just kind of
They also have winner archives, which I will also try and attach down below, that are just collections of decks that have won events. So if you are looking to be playing very high-powered Magic and hopefully win, that's a great way to kind of get an idea of something that has already won, already shown that it has merit.
I would also like to recommend our channel.
Yeah, of course.
Subscribe and look around and peruse. Like we explore a lot of this stuff, and hopefully it's educational at some point.
We have a lot of videos as well, specifically about higher level concepts. So if you already feel comfortable with some of this, but you want to get more into the nitty gritty of Canadian Highlander, check out some of our other videos, specifically some stuff like what is tempo?
Yeah.
We
also have deck text and such. Yeah. We'll just watch them all, you know?
Yeah, of course, of course. Lastly, I want to talk about where to play. Of course, please check your local game store. Yeah. If you don't have an event at your local game store, I've got a video about starting a play group.
Yeah, create one your own.
But also check and see if people aren't already playing. There is, of course, the Canadian Highlander Discord asyncs, where they play asynchronously and they have tournaments there. People also just love to ping people to play. That's another great way to play online. Some people use software like Cockatrice to play without any cards. And of course, one of the best ways is just playing with your friends. You don't need to be playing in a tournament to play Canadian Highlander. That's what's so fun about a homegrown format like this. So if you've got a bunch of friends and you both know the rules, go for it.
Or just make 2 decks, print 2 decks, and bring it to a commander night, and oops, we have 6 people. You just like take someone off, or you got eliminated early. Like, yeah.
Giving away all my secrets.
Oh no.
That's all I have for you today. I hope you are interested in Canadian Highlander and have a better idea of where to go from this. Please leave comments down below if you have any questions, and we will try to answer them to the best of our ability. And do you have anything else for us, Austin?
We want to make this video because we enjoy this format so much. It's so much fun to play Canadian Highlander, and I feel like a car salesman just like running around being like, this format, like if you're looking for something, this is the format to do it. Like this is so much fun.
You get to do so much cool stuff. And I hope this resource is really helpful for not only you new players learning, but also if you're the friend who's trying to get people into Canadian Highlander, you can send them this way. Because I'm a little ashamed to hear that there aren't that many resources for new players for Canadian Highlander.
Yeah.
So I hope this is a cornerstone for wherever you go. And thank you for staying at the Cryptic Keep, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.